Well, I'm joined by Craig Murray. The background to the Terrorism Act 2000. What I don't understand about it is I somehow you think, oh, it's after 9/11, but 9/11 was after the Terrorism Act 2000, and I've looked it up, and some of the justifications for it are that, like the animal rights movement or fast lane, and there's also the World Trade Center bombing of I think 1993. But they just don't seem anything like a justification for this legislation. Can you remind me and everyone else what was going on then?
Yeah. Well, strangely enough, it was presented as kind of liberal legislation um, and a result of the Northern Ireland peace process. The way Jack Straw presented it was saying, well, we've had this higgledy-piggledy mishmash of anti-terrorist measures which were passed during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. We need now to get rid of that and clean it all up and have one clear regime. Um, so it wasn't actually presented as due to an imminent terrorist threat or a wave of terrorism. I mean, things like animal rights and Faslane were mentioned during, but that wasn't given as a rationale for it. The rationale given for it was that once, funnily enough, a lack of terrorism. The rationale for it was that once the troubles in Northern Ireland had been brought to a close, or at least to a greatly reduced level, and the terrorist threat had receded, it was time to take a cool look and rationalise terrorist legislation. And that was then done with all these massive assurances given to the House of Commons and the House of Lords that it wouldn't be used against domestic protest groups. And in fact, they were assuring that it wouldn't be used against animal rights protesters, for example, not that it would be.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is if you look it up on Wikipedia, Terrorism Act 2000, and it's got amendments to it, you have to scroll down for quite a long time before they end. I mean, it's non-stop amendments to that legislation. Is that extraordinary in the number of amendments to it, or is that a usual number?
No, it's unusual. It's very unusual for Acts of Parliament to be repeatedly amended year after year after year. Very few Acts of Parliament you can think of that are like that. And all of them have been to make it broader, wider, and easier to prosecute people. And in particular, they, in regards to Section 12 of support for prescribed organisations, which is the section under which police are currently taking action against people. It was amended to remove necessity for intent. So so if you say something recklessly, which may lead somebody else to support a prescribed organisation, whether you intended to or not, that is an offence. It also was amended specifically to state that support doesn't have to be material support. It can be intellectual support, moral support, verbal support. It was amended to make plain that support doesn't necessarily mean providing a safe house to a terrorist, storing explosives for a terrorist, storing the funding of explosives, funding explosives for terrorists, all the things you might think of as support for actual terrorism. That all it means is, saying, I support Hamas. Saying that if you did support Hamas, I'm not saying I support Hamas, saying I support Hamas would be just that statement in itself would constitute support, as opposed to material support, which is what the courts had previously held. So all of these amendments were designed to make it broader and easier to convict people.
Um, I mean that it's almost impossible to avoid some sort of recklessness in some ways. Is it not? I mean, I just find that how on earth did that get through this reckless thing where you don't even mean to say something, or it's just that you kind of got someone to think something. It's just that is Orwellian beyond belief, isn't it?
The fact that you're being judged on what the effect that what you say has on some other individual who, some other hypothetical individual. It's extraordinary. This was all primarily, very largely, this was, Tony Blair era legislation, and the amendments were also mostly in the Blair era. And the people don't recall now. I wrote at the time that the Tony Blair government was the most repressive government and the most antagonistic government to civil liberties that we'd had in this country since the days of Lord Liverpool, and that was true. There was a huge raft of anti-libertarian legislation brought in by Tony Blair. But I'd like, if I can, to just move on to what's happening now and how that's going to affect the court hearing that's coming up in the week beginning the 21st.
Right, yeah, please.
Because there have been multiple arrests. 70 people were arrested yesterday, I believe, approximately. 23 or so were arrested the previous weekend. But as far as we are aware, nobody has yet been charged under the Terrorism Act specifically. I'm not aware of one. There may be one. If there's people can let me know. But I don't think people have actually been charged under the Terrorism Act, even though they've been arrested apparently under the Terrorism Act for holding placards saying, "I support Palestine Action." And the reason nobody has been charged is that one of the arguments made in the High Court and in the Court of Appeal last Friday was that it's self-evidently absurd to label Palestine Action a terrorist group when it's a non-violent group. Most of its members are pacifists, but also that this would have radical effects, that this would have disproportionate effects, that hundreds of people would be arrested and charged under the Terrorism Act. And the judges poo-pooed that. The judges said, no, that's not going to happen. The judges directly contradicted the Lawyers for Palestine Action in court when the Lawyers for Palestine Action said that was likely to happen. Now, on the 21st is the hearing on whether there will be a judicial appeal. The hearing last Friday was only whether the prescription could be halted pending that hearing. The actual hearing on whether there will be a judicial appeal happens on the 21st. So with the line from the state, with the line from the judges being, this isn't going to happen, lots of people are not going to be arrested and charged under the Terrorism Act. They can't charge lots of people under the Terrorism Act in the interim. But what will happen is the judges will maintain that line in the hearing on the 21st, or in the week beginning the 21st, and say, no, this isn't going to happen. Lots of people aren't going to be charged. But then, of course, as soon as the hearing is finished and that procedure's got rid of, they then will charge everyone. So they won't charge people until after the hearing, because if they did charge people, it would prove that what the Palestine Action's lawyers were saying was correct, that this was going to lead to disproportionate effects and disproportionate charges. At the moment, they have to not charge anybody to try to show that's not going to happen. Sorry, that was a bit convoluted, but
I get what you're saying. So effectively, the police are. Do you think they're instructed then? The police have been instructed. You would have thought by the commissioner or something.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's become extremely plain to me is that between the Home Office, the judges, and the police, this is all concerted by the state. The judges are corrupt. Last Friday's hearing was a farce, complete farce. A judgment of 104 paragraphs and 26 pages was produced in under 2 hours in written form. A second judgment the same day of 54 paragraphs was produced in 45 minutes from the Court of Appeal. We had the Court of Appeal judges happening to be in court at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening, able to hear instantly the appeal. The whole thing is a farce. It's all coordinated, and I've no doubt the lack of charges before the hearing is coordinated. by the Home Office, with the police and with the judiciary, in order to make sure that the next hearing fails. We live in a totally corrupted state. Do not be fooled by any of the appearance of independence of the judiciary, independence of the police. It's all a complete lie.
Well, we kind of suspect that, but now you've said it, it's even more scary. But for 10 days, what do you think we should do for 10 days? Because if the police are not going to do these arrests because they want to look like they're not rounding people up for this on the terror charges, do you think this is a window that we should all be sort of pushing the envelope on?
They will arrest people. It's just they won't charge them until after the next hearing. So people will be arrested, and they may be charged with more minor offences. But once they've got through the hearing on a judicial review, which I've got no doubt is going to refuse a judicial review because the whole thing's a stitch up. Once that's been refused, they then will charge everyone that they've been arresting this last week or so. All those people will actually get charged with terrorism once they've got the hearing for judicial review out of the way.
Okay.
What you do is up to you. I mean, a good friend of mine, Gordon Dimmick, I saw has put out today that he's going to turn up at a police station and hand himself in on Monday and say, "I support Palestine Action." That's his choice as to what he wants to do. He's an extremely brave man. We've seen what the defend juries people, what reaction they're taking. They are also extremely brave. One thing, it was stated clearly by the judges in court on Friday that it would not be illegal to call for the deprescription of Palestine Action. So strangely enough, while it would appear it is against the law to hold a banner saying, "I support Palestine Action," it's not apparently against the law to say, "I support the deprescription of Palestine Action." The trouble is, of course, while that may be clear to a judge, it's not necessarily clear to PC Plod. And you can end up, in jail for a year and a half on remand, waiting to prove that point in court. I'm not going to advise people what to do. People should make their own mind up about how they want to protest for prescription, how they want to continue to, but it shouldn't in any way chill general campaigning for Palestine.